Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode. For this week, I wanted to try and make a new series. Previously, I did a mini-series focusing on Studio Ghibli, which I really liked, but I wanted to focus on a new director. I've been watching a lot of Makoto Shinkai's movies, and I thought it'd be super fun to try and make a small series reinterpreting moments from some of his movies. And I wanted to start with one of my personal favorite, Garden of Words. It's a really beautiful movie that takes place in Japan, and it has a lot of rain and a lot of atmosphere, and it's about the relationship between a 15-year-old aspiring shoemaker and a 27-year-old teacher. They sort of both find themselves in this spot during a rainy day, and the story sort of takes off from there. If you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it, but it's a phenomenal movie. And that was sort of the idea for this episode. I wanted to take a moment in the movie that was very iconic. It's the sort of place where they were sitting during the rain. And I just wanted to focus on one of the characters. And I really want to capture that rainy atmosphere. And throughout the painting process, I'll be using mostly two brushes. And these are the two brushes I'll be using throughout the whole process pretty much. Some of my custom made brushes. I want to create some more of them and eventually share it all in a brush pack. But for now, I need to keep trimming it and refining it. But whenever it's ready, I'll be able to share it. So keep an eye out for that. But with that said, I think we're ready to jump into the painting process. So I'll see you in a moment. So I did a very simple drawing for this painting. And the first thing I absolutely always like to do is I gotta quickly get rid of the white. Because the longer I have the white on the canvas, the more my stress level goes up. Because like whenever you cover the white surface, I feel like you're making some sort of major progress. So getting rid of that early is something I always try to do. And oftentimes when I do a painting sort of like this, I try to think of like what is a color that's going to be pretty dominant in the painting itself. In this case, it's sort of a rainy scene. It's in a park, but it's not a very vibrant green. It has some of the blue in it. So I want to try and get that in pretty early on in the painting and just cover as much of the surface with it and just try to carve into it. Either add some more saturation, some more or desaturated it, or I simply just add shadows and light into it and just sort of carving in from it. It becomes like my foundation for the whole painting. You also can go with a much more vibrant color. I've shown in different videos where I started with a bright orange, even though it's like nature in the scene. It's just something I would encourage you to experiment and think about as you're doing your paintings. And one thing also, if you haven't seen my videos previously, I like to always, since my background is as a background painter, it's always easier for me if I just start with the background first, just a simple background, try to establish what I want. And then I do try to think of what type of character I want in the scene, but I then go in and try to finish the character, draw him what he could look like, what he's doing, and then I place him in the scene and I merge them together because it's much easier for me to solve problems like this and light a character more properly once I establish the scene, simply because it's my area of comfort. If your area of comfort is more with environment, with characters than environments, I encourage you to just reverse the process. But it's just something that I always like to do because I like to always try to convince myself I can do this painting, it's gonna work. So I like to start with things that help me build confidence and areas I feel more comfortable in. And also at this part of the process, you saw I'm starting to cut out some elements in the image that are very close to the foreground. I'm going to keep the rest of the image pretty much in one layer, but these elements that I cut out that you see here, it's sort of the fence and the grass and the big tree trunk. I cut them out because I want to be able to blur them and separate them out from the background. Because they're very close to our viewpoint in this shot, I think it'd be pretty cool if we can blur them. It just helps bring more focus to what's really important, which is the girl sitting in this area in the park. And one thing I personally find to be pretty tricky when you're drawing something that has a lot of nature, bushes, trees, anything that has a lot of detail to it, I always question like, how much detail should I put and how much should I remove? And it's never for me a really clear answer. It's just a sort of a way of experimenting by adding. Sometimes you add some of it and you realize it's getting a bit too noisy, and sometimes you're gonna have to remove it, or sometimes just not enough. And the way I always found it to be most helpful is always try to stay zoomed out. As you see, I'm doing this painting, I don't zoom in too much, only later on in the process when I have to paint the girl. But I'm trying to stay as far zoomed out as I can for as long as possible to try to think of the whole picture. Trying to see the whole thing, because seeing the whole thing allows me much better to gauge where is the detail missing, where can I amp it up, and where is it okay that it disappears? Because if you're looking, for instance, on top of the roof of this thing, I don't know what you call it, I wouldn't call it a gazebo because I don't think it's a gazebo, but on top of it, you see to the top left, there's almost no detail. And I think that's okay because in the final image, there's not much more detail, but in the painting as a whole, there's not much anything interesting there. So that's okay that we let it fall off. And this is a part I really like. So for me, like, I really love how they do rain in anime. It sort of has a very streaky feel. And the way I like to do it, I just draw a bunch of line first. I added a black layer behind just so I could see it because it's a brighter value. It was hard to see against the green. And then I just blur it. And I try to blur it with motion blur as much as possible to just get that streaky feel in. And after you do that, I kind of always have to go in and delete and add a bit. You can also give it much more contrast if you prefer. For me, I like to keep it just subtle enough that you can see it's raining, but it's not getting too overwhelming. It kind of depends how intense you want the rain to be in your image. And now that we sort of established the whole image, the feel of the image, I feel much more comfortable with the character. She's sort of sitting in the shadow of this thing, so we're not going to get too much contrast on her. And I just like to start with very flat colors, trying to block in what's the color of her shirt, her skirt, the skin tone. Just try to get that in early, and I'm gonna get rid of the drawing pretty early as well because I felt like there's some issues with it, and for me sometimes it's just easier when you just start carving into the image straight away rather than trying to solve it with line work. Because unlike in animated series, I'm not going to keep the line work. I was thinking about that for this painting actually. I was like, what if I actually try to push the much more of an animated feel where the characters has a drawing? I thought it would be too much, and I kind of like the when it's more cohesive, where if you don't use line drawing for anything in the image, I like to keep it out of it. But with that said, we're pretty close to wrapping this image up. I hope you enjoyed it. So thanks again as always for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I really like Garden of Words, and I'm curious if you've seen some of Makoto Shinkai's movies. Which one would you recommend to do next step painting for? For me, like, one that I'm really drawn towards is Your Name, but I'm open for suggestions, so let me know in the comment section below if you have any suggestions. I also want to wish you a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Bye.